Let's continue where we left off from the previous module. The last bit we did in the previous module was import the point cloud of the city. We are looking at it right now. It contains all the single buildings and base sections of the stackable buildings. And in this module, we're going to build up that point cloud. If all is good, your point cloud will look something like this. The middle ones being the towers and the outside being the houses, which are a lot smaller, hence there being more. Let's jump up. Let's drop down a new geometry node. And we call it Skyline. Let's turn off import city blocks and jump inside Skyline. Inside Skyline, we're going to drop an object merge. And we're going to find the out node in the previous node. So we have import city blocks, and we drop down a null node there, called it out base point cloud. That's what we're going to be importing. And we want to put it into this object. And now if we visualize that, we should see the same point cloud again. We are now ready to start work on this point cloud. Just to define this node as a utility node, I'm going to color it yellow. And let's drop down another null. We're also going to color this yellow, as it's going to be not really an out node, but more like an in-between step. I'm going to call it out underscore clean point cloud. For the time being, we're not going to do anything, but in case we do want to do something to the point cloud before then running our code on it later, it's good to have two nodes here so we can work in between those nodes. I'm just going to visualize it. Let's drop down a Python node and wire the Python node up there in the first input. I'm going to call it Python underscore Skyline. I'm going to leave it be for now. And before we're going to write the code, we're going to build a small system that's going to allow us to more or less paint the skyline. The idea for that is that once an artist works with your setup, they don't have to write their own code. They can simply paint where they want tall buildings and paint where they want shorter buildings, and the code will then take care of it for them. Let's drop down a box, and if we wire that box into the out node we just created here, then that creates a bounding box underneath. So after the box, let's drop down a delete node, and we want to isolate primitive number 5. And the reason for using primitive number 5 is simply because it is the top face of the box and thus gives us a good horizontal plane to work on. So in pattern we can say 5. We want to make sure that up top here that it's set to primitives, and we want to delete non-selected. That's going to leave us with just a single plane, and we're going to remesh that plane to paint on. So after the delete node, we can drop down a remesh node. Be very careful with wiring it up. If you look at our grid, you can see that the scale what we're working on is huge, and the remesh node has a pretty fine setting by default, where its target edge length is 0.2. If I'm going to wire that in, I'm going to be waiting for 20 minutes for this to cook, at least on my laptop. So let's set the target edge length to 5, and then wire it up, and then work down from there. Let's see what we get. So that is a lot better. Let's set it to 2. We want to go down. Let's say 0.5. I think that's fine enough, and it might take a second to cook. There we go. This is fine enough. We don't need it any finer. We can still control the height of the buildings easily this way. We're going to leave it there. Let's drop down a paint node. We want to make sure that the basic color is black. So we're going to go to the background color tab. That is already set to black. Make sure that operation for all is set to paint and click apply to all. And that paints it all black for us. Then later we're going to be painting with red values. So we're going to set the first one to 1 and the other two to 0. That should do the trick. Let's shorten this window a bit. Drop down a point VOP. And the purpose of this will become clear later. What we're going to do is we're going to be translating that red value into height data. We're going to call this point VOP cr_to_height. And then we can go and configure this node inside in the next clip.